Hello everyone, I am Cecilia Panigutti and I'm presenting the paper Understanding the Impact of Explanation on Advice Taking, a user study for AI-based clinical decision support system. This is shared work with my co-authors, Andrea Beretta, Fosca Giannotti and Dino Pedreschi, from an ecosystem of universities, in particular Scuola Normale Superiore, University of Pisa and CNR. Our work is based on the fact that most of recent research on explainable AI has been focused on developing explainable AI techniques to open AI black boxes, which means algorithms that are not human understandable, very complex algorithms. However, not much of this research has been focused on evaluating the explanation on real users, and even fewer focused on special kind of users. So we decided to explore the impact of AI explanation on healthcare providers. Our main research question is: how do AI explanation impact user trust in AI-based clinical decision support systems? So our hypothesis was that when presented with an explanation, healthcare providers would have trusted more the AI recommendation. To evaluate whether the AI explanation influenced participants' trust in the clinical decision support system, we used an estimation task. During this estimation task, participants were shown the clinical history of a patient and were asked to make an initial estimate about his risk of acute myocardial infarction. Then, they were shown an algorithmic suggestion that could have been with or without explanation, and they were asked to make a final estimate. We then use these quantities to calculate the weight of advice, or the extent to which participants change their initial estimate after receiving the AI system suggestion. The weight of advice is defined as the ratio between the shift in the human estimate over the difference between the algorithmic suggestion and the initial estimate. It is correlated with implicit trust, and it's our main dependent variable. The experiment had a choose-cell within subject design, which means that every participant saw both conditions, the AI suggestion with or without the explanation. And as I said, we used the weight of advice as our main dependent variable, but we also collected some open-ended questions. Finally, we recruited 28 healthcare professionals online. We will now show the interfaces shown to the participants for each stage of the estimation task. Here you can see a representation of a patient having 2 visits. This is the clinical history of a patient. And you can see that the participants could explore the diagnosis in each visit with a mouse over that provided more detail on that specific diagnosis. And then he could insert his initial estimate based on his knowledge of the diseases and the problem. The interface showing the algorithmic suggestion is basically the same. Again, the participant could explore again the symptoms and the diagnosis in each visit of the patient with the mouse over, with the only addition of the algorithmic suggestion. So he could provide his second estimate. This is the interface containing the explanation. As you can see, it's a little bit more complex. You can see that we have the clinical history, which is the same of the patient, but now we have the gray dots that were there already, the diagnosis of the patient in each visit, and some colored dots. The color has meaning. For example, the fact that a dot is blue, it means that these symptoms was considered important by the algorithm to reach its conclusion. We also have the addition of some symptoms and diagnoses that were not there in the original clinical history of the patient and now are colored yellow. This means that even though exactly the fact that they were not there in the original clinical history influenced the algorithm decision. After exploring again the explanation provided by the interface, participants were able to make their second and final estimate. We will now present our main findings. So first of all, the weight of advice. We actually measured a statistically significant difference between the weight of advice when the user were presented with an explanation and when the user was not presented with an explanation. So since the weight of advice is related to implicit trust, we can say that on average, participants implicitly trusted more the AI interface that provided explanations. Another interesting finding coming from the open-ended question is that participants perceive the explanation as being of low quality. We can see here some answers to the open questions. Decision-making became more of a lengthy and arduous process, or I wanted a more detailed rationale. So they were left unsatisfied by this kind of explanation. Last finding coming from the open-ended question is the fear of being replaced. We can see here some answers from, these are all nurses, in both conditions, with and without the explanation. You can see that here they say, okay, but this does not replace human judgment, or it disregards the human factor and individuality, or you cannot put AI in human nature, and also it takes away the thinking, the prestige, and all the effort and study you've put in. So, in conclusions, we showed that healthcare providers implicitly trusted more the AI suggestion when presented with an explanation. Also, even though the healthcare provider didn't like the explanation, they rely on it anyway. So the weight of advice was greater when the AI provided an explanation. And this might mean that there is a risk of automation bias. Also, many healthcare providers express a fear of being replaced. So this is an indication of possible algorithm aversion. So in future work, we will surely focus on these last two findings, and we will explore the relationship between trust in the AI recommendation, AI explanation, and the recommendation correctness. Thank you very much, and if you want further details, you can read the whole paper. It's open access. And you can also feel free to email us at these two email addresses. Thank you very much.